All right, recruiting tutorial. All right, so the number one question I get asked on TikTok or on Twitch when I'm streaming College Ball 26 is Carson Yaps, how do I recruit? How do I get better at recruiting? It's usually some variation of a recruiting based question. So I'm going to teach people how to recruit here. I won the Natty with Kent State in 5 years. No, 3 times in 5 years. My fault. 3 times in 5 years. And I won, or I took Wyoming to the playoff in just 1 year, recently on TikTok Live and Twitch. So I think I have a little bit of credential in terms of recruiting here, but I want to share my strategies with you guys. That way you guys can have similar results with your dynasties, or at least just feel more comfortable with recruiting, because I think a lot of people might play on auto recruiting or have just a hard time getting into the game because of recruiting, and that's totally valid, because recruiting is just one of those, like, you know, giant scary things with a lot of moving parts that might be hard for people to learn. But I want to help you guys. I want to teach you guys. So first things is, if you have the pre-order bonus and you can get the free 100 coach points, great. If not, no worries, you're gonna be fine. But it helps to get those for sure. First thing is we're gonna go down the recruiter coach skill tree. Really important that at the very minimum you just get the first tier for all the position groups except kicker and punter. This one right here with the kickers and punters, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be scouting kickers and punters. Even if you need a kicker or punter, I'll teach you how to deal with that later on. But at the very minimum, you want to get all of these. If you don't have the coach points DLC thing, or the pre-order bonus rather, no worries. Just over time, try and get these unlocked. You should be able to get all of them unlocked in your first season, maybe a season and a half. But either way, try and get them all unlocked, because you really won't be able to scout if you don't have those done. Early game, you definitely want to stay on recruiter and not worry about a tactician or motivator. Motivator will not help you, at least in the first, like, in the regular season and postseason. This will help a lot come off season with the training boost, when you are able to get that tier 3, put in work for each position group, get the off season training boosts, get all those free training points for your players. Tactician's definitely useful, but if you want to recruit really well, this won't help you. Specifically for recruiting, we want to go recruiter, obviously. And then that first tier unlock for all of these is really important. So that way you can just scout people in like 2 or 3 ticks instead of it's like 5 or 6 otherwise. So it saves you a lot of points that you could then use to actually make recruiting actions on players. If you're unable to do that, again, no worries. You just probably can't really do a lot of scouting in your first year really at all. The next tip is setting up your initial off-season recruiting board and stuff. It can be honestly really stressful. Last year, especially for me, this was really stressful, setting this up, because it kind of feels like it's going to dictate the rest of your season, how recruiting goes for you and stuff. And it kind of does, but it also doesn't really. So first things first, we're going to do this from the perspective of a group of 5 school or a low prestige school. If you're playing with a lower tier prestige school, do not even bother with the 4 and 5 star prospects. Don't even look at them. Don't even check. You might have 1 or 2 that are interested in the 4-star range. It's not worth going after. It's not worth it. Especially the number one thing that hampers these smaller schools is the pipeline situation. You can see the best pipeline we have for any 4-star prospects is a bronze 1 tier. And if we go look at, that's not a good example, but if we look at Russ Clark here, you can see that Russ Clark has Penn State as his #1 interest, which means that they're going to have, because he's from New Jersey, they're probably going to have a tier 3 or a tier 4 pipeline in that state. Obviously, New Jersey is like right next to Pennsylvania. So we're going to be competing against a tier 3 or 4 pipeline when we have a tier 1 pipeline. That is a significant difference. And even further down, if we look at Malik Weddle, who's from Florida, and he has 2 Florida teams on his board, both UF and Miami. They're both going to have a tier 5 pipeline for this guy because he's from Florida. We don't even have a pipeline. So even if this guy was #1 interested in coming to Delaware, don't even bother. Don't even bother, because you're just immediately going to waste all your points trying to get this guy. It's not worth it. Now, 3 stars follow a similar logic, but again, because we only have that 1-tier pipeline for really the best possible players we can get, or I guess the best pipeline we have is a 1-tier across all players. We're going to try and stay in that range. We can bounce outside of that a little bit for 3-star players. But yeah, basically, we're going to sort by pipeline, and then we're just going to, you know, based on what your needs are, add players and just kind of go quarterback, then running back, then, you know, receiver, tight end, so on and so forth. That is essentially how you put together a recruiting board. It is that simple. Now, before you go like too deep into building that board, you definitely want to compare and contrast against what your team needs are. You get to this page just by off of any recruiting screen, pressing right stick in or R3. And then it'll bring you to this handy dandy spreadsheet here that's going to teach you or tell you basically what your situation is across all your position groups. For example, like it tells us we have 5 senior receivers, a total of 13 over here. Ignore this need thing, because this need thing is just going to go based on like whatever scheme you're running or whatever the game thinks you need at each position. This game says we're going to be good with 8 receivers. We probably would be, but you also have to take into account that we have 3 guys, if you scroll over here, that are probably going to transfer, or at least might transfer. And so based on that, 13 total minus the 5 graduates that we have, minus the 3 potential transfers, that leaves us with 5. Is that right? 5? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to try that again. I don't want to look bad at math when I upload this. So because we have 13 total and we're graduating 5, and then we also have 3 that might transfer, not to mention you also want to flip back and forth between this handy dandy thing on the side to see, like, really, do you have talented players there? Is that spot that, you know, you're not very good at, you might need to recruit for just based on the talent level of that position group. The need thing is not tremendously accurate, so don't really worry about fulfilling this need thing. Go based on what you know you need. It might be helpful, it might not be. In this case, it would mislead us for sure. I'm gonna try and keep this like as nutshell-y as possible and try and not like get too complicated with this or whatever. I will say it's really important to go O-line early and go really deep on your O-line as well. You want to avoid raw strength archetype guys for sure. But I mean, just looking at this for us, we are graduating our backup left tackle, our 2 backup right tackles we're graduating. So we have 2 total tackles. And again, you can shuffle these guys between, you know, each tackle position basically for free in the off season, and it won't really matter. Even if you want to play your left tackle at right tackle during the regular season, it doesn't matter. No impact to attributes or anything. But I mean, just for organizational sense, I like to look at it like I have 2 total tackles on roster next season. You know, I don't look at it like I have 1 right tackle and 1 left tackle. It's easier to say I have 2 total tackles. You know what I mean? We're graduating all of our left guards. So we have 2 total guards on roster for next season. One of them is a 54 overall as well. It says no potential transfers for O-line. I don't know if I trust that. But out of all of our interior O-line positions, we have 2 total players. There are 3 positions, and each position needs a backup. So not great there. We're going to want to definitely recruit O-line heavily. But in general, you want to make sure you have heavy O-line recruiting going on, because this game is impossible to play on higher difficulties. If you play on Heisman like me, or if you play All-American, or even if you play on varsity or freshman, like, you cannot win in this game if you have a bad offensive line. So definitely go crazy on your offensive line recruiting. But definitely avoid those raw strength guys, because it's really hard to develop them later. In the case of our tackle situation, I can only find 2 tackles that are interested in coming here that are in a pipeline. That's not the biggest deal. In the case of this, where it's definitely worth going after some extra players there, we can take a shot maybe on like some players that are outside the pipeline. You also just want to kind of glance at what their top schools are there. Make sure that we're not going up against the likes of Tennessee, Auburn, Georgia, Mississippi State, Clemson, especially for O-linemen. It's pretty likely that those top end programs will go in for a 3-star or, you know, lower tier player once they get, you know, through with recruiting the 4-stars and everything. I don't remember Delaware being this hard. I don't remember having no offensive linemen rostered when I did Delaware. That's funny. Like in the case of Darren Durant here, I'd rather not go after the 1 guy available in our pipeline, even though he's the only center available in our pipeline that would be interested in coming here. but he's raw strength. So I would rather go after Chuck Woods here as a pass protector. I don't love the pass protector archetype either. Well-rounded and agile are my favorite, but pass protector is third, and I won't even recruit raw strength guys. Not even a chance. We've put together our board. What I like to do is I like to go position by position, and at least for like your skill position players, you're gonna scout them. Like if you were able to get those scouting upgrades in the beginning, definitely scout them. If you aren't able to get your scouting upgrades, what at the very minimum I would do, because the game gives you 10 points for your coach upgrades, if it's not too late, I would highly recommend going in here and just picking one of receiver, running back, and quarterback to get that tier 1 upgrade in. You get 10 points. Each of them costs 8. Just do one of them. Pick your poison there. If your team desperately needs a quarterback, do the quarterback one. If you really need receivers, whatever, figure out what you need there and then apply it. But in any case, for your quarterback, running back, and receivers, those are positions I would definitely scout. You don't want to pick up a quarterback just to find out he's got, a dual threat who has like 74 speed, or, a pocket passer who, can throw it, with 82 throw power or whatever. You generally want to make sure that you're going after guys that would be pretty good, or at least serviceable enough for your program. Now, again, I did check against our team needs here. I noticed that we have a lot of running backs. We already have 5 rostered after graduating silver, and only 2 want to transfer. So, like, in the case of this, you're not going to get all 35 guys that you put on your board. In fact, you're probably not even going to get half of them. You don't have a lot of resources as a small school, as a low prestige school. You don't have a lot of points to be, going into these players with for recruiting. So more often than not, in your first couple seasons, you're going to get like 10, maybe 15 high school players, and that's totally fine. You're going to do most of your work in the portal, and the portal is the best way to develop a team like really fast with a ton of really good players. Like if you want to get this 70 overall Delaware Blue Hens team up to a 80 overall really fast, leverage the portal. And I have a portal method that I'll be showing you later on. We don't really need to be too worried about, quarterback, because we're probably not going to be wanting to bring in, a low mid 60 overall quarterback to be our starter here anyways, unless you want to go for a little bit more flavor and have that 4-year starter at QB or whatever. And especially at running back, we would have 3 rostered, even if the 2 that are potential transfers do both transfer. We'll still be relatively close to where we want to be for head count there, so we can just go pick up the missing player there in the portal. So if you can't address every single one of your needs in high school recruiting, don't worry about it. There's always the transfer portal later on, and it's way easier to recruit there. But yes, we're going to be scouting, the skill position guys here, like Ben Sams for a G5 quarterback. 69 awareness is pretty high. Means that he'll probably be pretty close to a 69 overall, give or take a point or 2 or 3 for a 3-star. 81 speed for a dual threat, 87 throw power. I'm not mad at that at all. I think he's actually one of the better 3-star low-ranked dual threats that I've seen. Honestly, better than some of the 4-star dual threat quarterbacks that we've seen. And again, like, you're not really just like, okay, it's whatever, it's fine, I guess. Like, you generally want for your skill position players to be pretty good. So, if you're looking at Benji Kiki here, who's an East-West playmaker, so he's going to be, more elusive, faster kind of thing. And you're like, well, I can't get it done with 87 speed, and sure as hell not getting it done with only 68 spin move. Take him off your board, go find someone else. For me, this is a pretty good player for that kind of for this kind of caliber of recruit. I think that's really good. Now, this game is not College Football 25, and this game is not NCAA 14. So when you find a 3-star low-ranked wide receiver with 90 speed, you immediately offer that guy. It doesn't. No other circumstances required. 71 catching, I don't care. 67 short route running, I don't care. We're going all in on Zach Byer here, 6'3" speedster with 90 speed. That's really good starting point for a low-ranked 3-star. Now, Soma Woodhead here is a little weird because he's got very low awareness, which generally would indicate a low overall. However, his speed is pretty decent, and his catching is actually better than Zach Byers was. So this guy actually might be like a mid-60s overall. We didn't find any gems with these skill position guys, which means, we're not really sure what their dev traits are going to be like, if any of them are going to be better or worse. Maybe Byer or Woodhead or Impact, maybe Sanders is normal, I don't know. But with Sanders here, notice the 70 awareness. Again, that awareness really closely correlates with what their starting overall is going to be. So in this case, he's probably going to be pretty close to a 70 overall. Maybe like a 69 or a 68, but he's generally going to be a pretty high rated 3-star wide receiver. And again, 86 speed in a G5 division or with G5 competition, that's actually not really that bad. So I wouldn't stress that. Next up, we're going to come over here to just the need scholarship thing, and we're just going to offer everybody. You have 35 scholarships that you absolutely must offer. You cannot go into week 0 without having offered 35 total scholarships. When you offer a scholarship, it indicates to the recruit like, yo, I'm interested in you. And then therefore you start building up weekly passive influence with them every week. The influence is what manifests on this screen here. You can see the big bar in the middle, which is obviously the most important thing, is titled influence. So every week you gain influence based on what recruiting actions you put into them and whether or not you have a scholarship with them. If you don't have a scholarship on this player, you will not gain influence. So it's very, very important that you offer 35 guys, because at the minimum, that means there's 35 guys that you're getting passive influence with. In many cases, you're going to find that like no other AI team has put a scholarship in on certain players. Like maybe Daryl Mines were the only school that puts a scholarship in for him. Not right away, but eventually we will take the #1 spot on his top schools board, because we're the only team that's gaining that passive influence with him. And it usually, if you're not putting recruiting actions into him, it'll take a little while, but it'll usually happen. And that's a really, really good way to just get pretty much free players. It doesn't work all the time. I don't even know if it's quite a 50% success rate, but there's literally no harm in doing it, especially in this period of time where you're only able to offer scholarships and scout. There's no reason to go into week 0 without having 35 offered scholarships out there. In fact, my worst recruiting classes have come from like me messing up and over scouting in this period to where I wasn't able to offer 35 scholarships. My worst classes come from that, because then in the period of time in week 0, week 1, where you're supposed to be putting your hours into recruiting actions on a player, instead of doing that, you're wasting your hours offering scholarships when you should have already done that. You probably noticed that scholarships cost 5 points, 5 hours per scholarship to offer, and you have to offer 35. So that means that you have 175 of your total hours in this period that you have to set aside for offering scholarships. The rest are yours to do with. So if you want to start going down like your offensive lineman or something and start scouting them, looking for the gems, this is your time to do that. Now, remember, like if you don't have that first tier upgrade for your recruiter skill tree, then you're not going to just be able to flip through guys like this. It's going to take you probably like 5 or 6 scouting actions or whatever to see what their attributes are. In this case, we just found a bust. So a bust means that he's probably not going to have a good dev trait. It's probably going to just be normal since it's a 3-star. It scales with what their recruiting rank or their recruit ranking is. So for a 3-star bust, they're almost always going to be normal. I've never seen one be impact, I don't think. For a 5-star bust, I've seen them still be impact. I've even seen 5-star bust be star dev trait. It goes from normal dev trait at the worst to impact, star, and then elite. You definitely want to get as many elite and star dev traits as possible, because while it doesn't impact their starting overall, I don't think, it certainly impacts their ending overall, because they're going to just get way more they're going to get way more XP tokens to improve their abilities with in the training results portion of the off season every year. And it is a massive difference between a normal dev trait guy who might get 20 skill points and an elite guy who might get 75. So here we've offered everybody. We've scouted as many people as I'm allowed to. We have 5 hours left. You need 10 hours to scout with, so we're pretty much done here. There's gonna be those 5 extra hours that I guess we could just send the recruiting staff home and just take it easy here. Not much more we could, like, there's literally nothing we could do with those extra 5 hours. If you find yourself in the preseason having followed the same method, and you have an extra 5 hours, don't even worry about it. So we just advanced week to week 0 now from the preseason. We could see that already 4 dudes have locked us out. And 1 guy's already into his top 8. That means all 5 of these guys have to come off our board. You cannot, there's no lock break ability like there was last year. You can only, if someone locks you out, it's wraps. You're done. You can't get that guy anymore. And then in the case of Elijah McGahee, I'll tell you why we're taking him off the board in just a moment. So in week 0, these hours are totally different than your hours in the preseason recruiting portion. In the preseason recruiting portion, you could only scout and you could only offer a scholarship. Now we can actually do these actions here. So later on, you'll be able to do soft sells and hard sells. This becomes available. It says right there when the recruit has narrowed down to his top 5 schools. So if you make the cut to the top 5 there, then you'll be in and you'll be able to start pitching him based on what your grades are over there on the right side. But for now, we're only going to be able to do these these 4 at the top here. I would never put 5 points into someone. It's just totally not worth it. Even 10, like you're really not going to be gaining much influence there. I would really only limit it to 25 or 50. And then for a 3-star, especially with how few resources we have don't have a lot of hours to recruit with. I wouldn't really put 50 hours into anybody unless I was trying to go after a 4-star. I did tell you, or I don't know if I told you, but if you go to the 4-star prospects right now here in week 0, there's someone with 15 offers. Don't even think about it. There's a bunch of 4-stars that would actually be like fairly interested. Like this guy, Darren Bishop, we could see here on the right side. No, he would be okay with coming here. And nobody else has offered him. So you could make a play on Darren Bishop if you wanted to, but you would have to put 50 hours into him every single week and not lay off that. And then as soon as Georgia or LSU or Notre Dame or Clemson or Auburn decide that they're interested in this guy, you just will immediately lose him. It'll take like 2 or 3 weeks, but they will take such large strides towards recruiting him that you just stand no chance. But what I would do here is just be cognizant of the positions you really need, and then be thoughtful of like where you're going with this. So like, do I want Ben Sams at quarterback next year, or do I want to go find a portal guy? Because you will find way better players in the portal. But if I'm thinking like, man, this Ben Sams, I'm thinking Ben Simmons, Ben Sams guy, you know, pretty decent starting point, honestly. Like, you know, he will be pretty solid as long as his dev trait and his skill caps aren't too bad. You know, maybe I just want to take a shot at him. So this is the method. You're going to go 25 hours into him. If you go 25 hours into as many recruits as possible, that's 14 recruits that you're going to be doing this method with. The number one like thing here is that you're just avoiding competition. You're not just avoiding competition against the top end schools. You're avoiding competition against even the likes of UConn, other G5. I know UConn's not G5, but you're avoiding all competition entirely. The idea here is that we're going after dudes that nobody else is talking to or interested in. Nobody else is trying to recruit. And we're just going to be pretty much playing the passive game where I'm going to give Russ Sanders, for example, 25 hours each week by doing the friends and family thing. And eventually he's going to commit to me if nobody else starts talking to him. That is pretty much the method and the strategy here. It's not perfect. You might result in getting 5 guys. It might result in you getting 15 to 20. But, you know, this is easily the best method in terms of like simplicity and making sure that you can get a full recruiting class each year. So just for posterity, I guess I didn't really show this, but I took off the 6 tackles besides Steven Riggins that we were looking at previously. And I could only find 2 more that have 0 offers and are actually interested in coming here. So we're just going to go in on both of them. And it's going to cost us a few points in scholarships. It's not the biggest deal. It's more important that we're able to get, you know, as many offensive linemen as possible. Because remember how dire our situation is here, specifically with Delaware. In the case of Tony Virgin, Temple's in the mix, and they have a pretty decent pipeline there. So it's actually a little bit concerning. Remember, my tackle situation is so bad. I have 2 total tackles rostered for next season. It's pretty critical that I bring in as many as I possibly can. So if I waste some points going after Tony Virgin and he just ends up going to Temple, that's not the worst thing. But in the case of all these locked out guys, we just have to take them off the board. And I added a few more guards as well. Based on the fact that I couldn't find a lot of tackles, next best thing is guards. So you can always recruit a guard and then just flip them to tackle if it so allows you. Nick Teague is another guy. We have a bronze tier pipeline, but there's 2 schools in the mix, UMass and UConn. You know, in this case, you know, use your judgment if you want to compete with them. They both have better pipelines than you. I would say no. I'm just gonna back off this dude. Same thing like Kerry Octavian. There's so much competition there, not even worth pursuing. You know, Daryl Mines. We don't have a pipeline at all for him. Why the you? Oh, Why the hell does UConn have a tier 1 pipeline in Jacksonville, Florida? How does that make sense? But in the case of Daryl Mines, we're just going to back off of him. In Emmett Rahman, there's stiff competition there. Henry Rhodes and Schmitz, we just added them to the board, and they are both wide open. So we're going to take a stab on them. We're going to go back to the prospect list, though. We're going to see if we can find any guards who are not currently being offered by anybody else. Again, we would rather not bring in any guards than bring in a raw strength guy. So in the case of Deshaun Khan, he's raw strength. We're just going to say no. Tamita Sami is a no, but Alan Connell is a yes. He's from Pennsylvania. Penn State's on his interest board, as you would figure, but they're not offering him yet. So at the very minimum, we can at least put an offer in and then just try and get that passive influence with him for the time being. In the case of your outside linebackers, I recommend just going after these guys early. You're going to have a hard time finding outside linebackers later on in the high school recruiting period. They get, recruited up pretty fast. Middle linebackers a little easier to find. D linemen, sometimes hard, sometimes easy. But outside linebackers are generally the first position to go alongside O linemen. So that's why I'm going pretty heavy O line early, going after 6 total O linemen. Plus, our O lineman situation is dire. So it's best to just try and get that pieced together soon. And then same thing with outside linebackers. They're kind of hard to find later on. So it's just better to try and find a solution there now. All right. So I've gone through my board. I've taken off all the players that I'm just not really interested in pursuing, if they have great, a ton of competition or they've locked me out. And I'm down to 25 out of 35 targets. That's okay for right now, because it's important that you're putting together like the list of dudes you're actually going to go after. If you're a little bit short on 35 total scholarships offered, that's fine. But over the course of the season, you're still going to be wanting to check that prospects list and then trying to put in some extra players here and there for, again, trying to get that passive influence on a week to week. But just checking it out weekly and looking for those prospects when you have like a few extra points is pretty helpful. So we're here in week 1, and you'll notice after simming a week, we're still not on a team's board or a player's board. That's okay. It doesn't mean anything. Based on how this works is it ranks all 136 total FBS teams from number 1 Penn State here to wherever, whoever the last team is. You can't see past, the number 9th school on his board. But it ranks teams like that. So we're probably somewhere in the middle now that we put some actual influence in with him. Eventually we'll jump up to number 1 since we're the only school offering him any sort of recruiting hours at all. Don't be alarmed if you put recruiting points into a guy and you're not like on the board. It will come probably the next week. But it depends on how many you put in. So in this case, we put 25. Usually that's 2 or 3 total weeks before we'll see ourselves in his top 10. If you put 50, you'll usually jump into the top 10 after a week. And then 10 and 5, you're probably not going to find yourself on his top 10 until a couple weeks in, 3 or 4 or 5 weeks in. In the case of Tony Virgin, I highlighted him earlier. Temple's going in after him, but you could see here they're not really moving that influence bar that fast. That means that they just offered him that scholarship and they're not actually putting any recruiting hours into him. So they're just collecting that passive influence on a week to week. They're not actually like aggressively pursuing him. So that means that we don't have to worry about the competition right now. It's not wasted points right this second to go after him. Now, that said, when they see that we're pursuing him, when the AI sees that we're going after him, they might step it up. They might not. So it's, just kind of worth noting that we're good for right now. So we're here in week 2. We've simmed twice total since I first started recruiting this guy, and we're still on his board, or we just popped onto his board. So you can see kind of where we started and the influence we gained. So next week we'll be number 1 on his board, and at that point we'll be able to see on a week to week how much influence we're actually building with this recruit. And you should probably at this point see it for all the recruits you're going after. Again, it takes about 2 weeks to find or to get into it with your recruits. If you're not on their board already and you're putting 25 points into them, it takes really 1 week to see yourself on their board if you put 50 hours. And then again, I don't know 10 and 5 because I wouldn't recommend doing that. On a week to week though, you want to just check to see where you're at, what you're doing, how far into the progress bar at the top you are, once you're in their top 5, new options come up. So, just checking in weekly And then also just double checking that nobody else is offered on your guys. Because again, you definitely want to bow out if there's, all of a sudden competition. All right, so now you should see yourself number 1 on pretty much everybody's board. And you just kind of let it ride at this point. At this point, we're also going to try for a couple of these guys, just kind of consolidating our hours and just trying to get like some of these guys wrapped up. So like cornerback, not the most important position. D tackle, not the most important position. So for these guys, I'm just going to let that passive influence ride. But like for those O linemen that I was talking about how badly I need them, I'm going to go 50 deep on them. And I'm just going to see, maybe if that helps us lock them up sooner. So that way we can feel a little bit more comfortable about our offensive line situation. Again, like whatever, like this method, there's a little bit of degree of randomness to it. For the most part, it will work. But whatever you're not able to address in terms of your needs in the regular season recruiting portion, the transfer portal is the better place to address these anyways. All right, with Nick Schmitz, we have hit his top 5 on his progress bar at the top, which means we can go over to the recruiting tab and highlight the active action that we have on him. In this case, send the house. And we can hold triangle or Y to remove it. And that's going to give us our hours back so we can put a different action in on him. And then we're going to go down to hard sell, and we're going to just try and play process of elimination. Over there on the right side, you can see, X's and question marks and check marks and stuff. What that means is an X means he's not interested in that motivation. The grade indicates how much like influence we're going to gain for pitching that motivation to him. So if, for example, like, Delaware is not great at sending offensive linemen to the NFL, fun fact. And so we have a D+ grade for pro potential for his position group, meaning that we're not going to get a whole lot of influence if we pitch, hey, man, we can, we'll send you to the league. He's going to look around and say, who else have you sent to the league? Like, what are you talking about? But basically, you're trying to find all the green check marks and put them onto one pitch. That's how this works. So if you, like, for example, this one up here, what was it? For gamer up here, we can see that it highlights over playing style, which that has that red X next to it, meaning he's not interested in that. That's not a pitch that he's interested in hearing. There is one that has 3 green check marks. We just have to find it. So you're going to find a pitch that matches up with his 1 green check mark that we know and possibly 2 question marks. So in this case, it could be Sunday player, considering, there's no red X marks. There's no red X's next to any of those motivations. Is there any other one it could be? No. So he is just interested in Sunday player. Now, this is where you have to kind of make the decision. Are my grades good enough to like support me making this pitch? I would say probably not, for us at least in this particular case. So it's just better that we're sending the house on Nick Schmitz. However, with Chauncey Scales, we can see we can't pitch him yet because we're still in his top 8. But if you look over there on the right side, we have a B+ for one of his interests and an A+ for the other, meaning that whatever the third interest is, it won't really matter because we actually have pretty decent grades for what he's interested in off rip. So we will eventually, when we get to his top 5, we will be hard selling him on whatever his pitch is. But in the case of Schmitz, because we have such terrible grades for what he's interested in, it's just not worth doing. And that will change once you grow your program and stuff. Once you get bigger wins and you win bowl games and you win conference championships, and once your prestige as a coach goes up, your stability goes up. Once you put your program in a better position to be like successful, these grades on the right will change. Obviously, like you've seen, probably other content creators, probably myself, take programs from like the depths of hell to, winning championships and stuff. And over the course of time, those content creators will go from recruiting 3 stars that they're not sure they're going to get to recruiting 5 stars and getting them. And that's based on these grades on the right changing. And that's why you can't really go after 5 stars and 4 stars to begin with, because your grades are going to be so much worse than, say, Penn State, Bama, Mississippi State, and Ohio State. They will all have B+ as their worst grade, probably closer to A- for most of them. Maybe not Mississippi State, they suck. But Penn State, Bama, and OSU, just pretending real life doesn't exist in this game. They're all going to have A's for pretty much all their grades. So you can't compete with that if you have a bunch of D's and F's and C- and stuff. You just won't. You won't get any influence compared to what they're getting. So that's why we try to avoid competition, and that's why we try to avoid going after higher tier recruits because we don't want to compete with them. We just don't, because we can't. Also, I've had the question asked before on TikTok, like, hey, Carson Apps, when I put, you know, a recruiting action on a player, I don't see those points again next week. It's because the recruiting action just saves onto that player. And again, you can hold triangle or Y to remove it. And then you can see at the top, you get your hours back. You could just go back to that player and do something different. Or you could, you know, your recruiting actions are just saved whenever you put them on. And so like, it'll just do that same recruiting action to that same player every week, unless you come over here, remove it, and do something different with those points. But those points aren't just like lost in the oblivion. Like they're just on that player until you say otherwise. So in the case of Steven Riggins, same thing. We're going to come over here. We're going to evaluate, do we have possibly good enough grades for the things he's interested in? I'm going to say probably not, just looking at this. Again, we're looking to line up whatever the pitch is that highlights all the check marks, because those are things he's definitely interested in. And then for whatever's left that we don't know whether or not he's interested in it, it has to be a question mark. Cannot be a red X. A red X means it's the wrong pitch, and you will not get influence for giving him the wrong pitch. It's probably going to be clocked in here. The problem is that we have an A+, an F, and a D+, so we actually wouldn't get that much influence with him because of those 2 bad grades, even though we have 1 really good grade. So in that case, it's just worth sending the house. You might have noticed this sway button here. The sway button essentially is like, you're basically going to tell him, like, hey man, you know, I know you're interested in those things, but like, what if I pitched you on, like, you know, playing style and coach stability? Like, we'll be here a while kind of thing, and we'll play the same way. Like, basically, you're trying to convince him to take a different pitch. And you can see there at the bottom, it you know, bases it on how many green check marks you're, like, confirmed interested motivations you're trying to sway him towards. So, like, for example, if I wish I had a better example, but if I had good grade for playing style and coach stability, but my pro potential grade is awful, then I would want to sway him here, because it would be a high success rate of eventually swaying him and giving me as much influence as if I was hard selling him on, you know, the clutch. Swaying is risky. It works sometimes if you're like competing for a recruit and you just have no shot unless like you're able to switch the motivations to something that you're better off doing. In the case of Steven Riggins, where we're not actually competing for him, we're just better off keeping the 50 hours on him. And then additionally, the soft sell is literally just the hard sell, except you just get it half as much influence at the cost of half as many points. Don't really pay attention to those little green triangles over there that, you know, pretend to indicate how much influence you're gonna get. It doesn't tell the truth. It's not worth paying attention to those. Now, for the guys that you're putting 25 hours into, you can come over here and you can look, and if you have a good pitch that you wanna make to them, again, you know, just, it's kind of process of elimination. But, you know, say we figure out what his pitch is, like it probably is the clutch here. And if you had good grades for these things, you could just soft sell him at the cost of 20, and that gives you that extra 5 points, which you then could go use to put scholarships on extra players for your board. In this case, we don't have good grades for that, and I don't really want to risk getting less influence with this guy in a week to week, so I'm just gonna keep it as is. Now, in the case of visits, you can, if you have an extra points laying around, you can schedule a visit, and you get to pick the week that they come out. It has to be a home game that they visit for, as evidenced by these 3 games. They're all home games, or a bye week. If you're, you know, obviously on the road and you're playing a different team at their stadium, you can't host a visit at someone else's stadium. You wouldn't want to host a visit at someone else's campus. So, you know, obviously during a bye week when everybody's chilling at you know, home or at school or, you know, on campus or whatever, you can have the recruit come out, or during a game, and you get extra influence based on, you know, how good of a game that is. Something worth noting, you have to, if you schedule it during a game, it's really, really important that you try and win that game by 20 points. Because 20 points, I think actually the threshold's like 18 or 19 points, but 20 points for sure. If you win by 20 points or not, you get plus 75% influence for that visit, which is huge. It can instantly commit someone. It's called the blowout factor, you know, blowout win factor, whatever. But if you are, say, not sure if you're going to beat MTSU, don't schedule him for that game. Don't schedule a recruit for a game you're probably going to lose, because that is going to shred your influence game for the visit. It'll cut it in like half. It's definitely not worth doing. But visits are really, really important if you time them right, and especially if you win those games. I use them to try and, like, you know, snag dudes who I have no business of getting. If I'm competing with, say, Rutgers, who has that pipeline 5th tier or whatever, Hall of Fame pipeline or whatever. You know, my 2K side coming out there, but you know, and they're gaining ground, but I have a slim lead. I'll schedule this game MTSU, I'll play it, and I'll beat the brakes off of MTSU, and then based on that blowout percentage or the extra blowout influence I get, I'll commit him, and then Rutgers can't do anything about it. You got to use them strategically. You will gain influence for any kind of visit, whether it's a bye week. You don't get a lot of influence for these, but you will gain influence for a loss as well. It just isn't a lot of influence, and you only get one opportunity to have a recruit visit, so you kind of have to be careful with that. In this case, like, you know, it says UTEP and Louisiana Tech are fairly decent teams, so we'd get a little bit more influence for them coming out for this game, and especially winning that game. If we were to lose it, we'd, you know, not lose as much influence as what the game's telling us, which is true, but you still will lose a lot of that influence, and it's gonna kind of, you know, not get the most out of your visit, so to speak. In the case of like you're going after top end guys, like the guys I'm going, you know, 50 points into, you know, those are probably the guys I'd want to get on visits first, and you know, not worry so much about, you know, the 25 point guys that I'm going after. Now, when you decide which recruit, if at any at all, you want to put a visit or send on a visit, you have to select the week that they're coming out. Again, you know, try and get it on a game. Bye weeks help. They're not great. You know, say we want to have them come out to MTSU, then we have to pick an activity, so to speak, on what we're gonna do when he's out, and each activity correlates with a specific motivation over there on the right side. Now, if you have bad grades for these, like we do, then even sending him on a trophy tour, which will show off our conference prestige. By the way, Delaware just got to the FBS this year, so I don't know what trophies you're showing him. This won't get us a lot of influence, so it actually just might be kind of not worth sending him on this visit. I'm still going to do it, though. You still get more influence for bringing him in on a visit for an activity in which the motivation does not have a great grade. In this case, conference prestige is one of his interests, but it's a C-. I'll get more influence for bringing him on that visit than I will if I go after his A+ grade. Interests, like, they matter so much. If you try and pitch him on, you know, whatever your best grades are, hard sell him or soft sell him on that, even if they're not his interests, you will not really gain that much influence at all with him. You're better off just going the, you know, 25 or 50 hour method. But in this case, same thing with the visits. You're not going to get a lot of influence if you try and bring him in on something he's not interested in. Like, you ever go on a trip somewhere that you don't really want to go on, and then, like, whoever you're going on the trip with wants to go see the museum of something you've never heard of, and you're not interested at all? You just want to get through it. You just want to go home. And it's the same thing for Tony Virgin here. If you bring him in and he has no interest at all in your team history, but you take him on a 6-hour history tour of the University of Delaware, he's going to be bored to tears. He's just going to want to book that flight home. So bring him in on something he's interested in, conference prestige, that will resonate with him, even if you're not the most prestigious of conferences. And the cool thing about visits is now that we have his visit booked, we get those 10 hours right back. So then you can go and put them on the next recruit that you want to have come visit. And there's this thing called complementary and competitive visits. Basically, if you bring in 2 players that are at like complementary positions, like such as an offensive line, you'll get bonus points for having them both visit. Now, if you bring in 2 tackles or 2 guards or 2 centers, those are considered competitive visits because both those players play the same position. Now, it works weird. If it's a right tackle and a left tackle, I think it still would be competitive. I might be wrong on that. But it also works outside of the same position group. For example, a running back would love to see that you're looking at strengthening your O-line. So if you bring in 2 O-linemen and then a running back, all 3 of them will get complimentary visits. Even though the running back is not an offensive lineman, the offensive line people will want to see who they're blocking for. So it kind of works that same way. A quarterback will get bonus influence for bringing in receivers on a visit, and same thing on the defense. Defensive linemen interact well, front 7 guys, and then linebackers and with each other, and also defensive backs as a position group. So complementary visits, just kind of think about what complementary positions are. Competitive, obviously, it's 2 players of the same position group. Now, a quarterback will never really care if you bring in a middle linebacker. You won't get a complimentary visit or a competitive visit for that. It'll just be, 2 separate visits pretty much and function as so. Each week, you can only bring in 4 total players for a visit. So if I somehow had the points to bring in, you know, my entire board right now of people who are interested, I'd only be able to pick between 4 total players for this week against MTSU. And once this is filled up, then I can only schedule visits for week 11 and week 14. So when you're building your schedule in the regular season, you actually want to be pretty mindful of that. Late in the season is when most of your visits will occur. So you want to make sure that you have ample home games at the end of the year. In this case, like, it's kind of funky. We're going to have in pretty much 10 weeks, or in 5 weeks, we'll have 2 weeks where we can actually get visits scheduled. And once week 11 passes, we're only going to have 1 week in which we can have visits scheduled. So building your schedule, you want to make sure that you have enough home games at the end of the season. I wouldn't make it so unrealistic where you're playing all your away games in the regular season, or in the beginning of the regular season, but whatever you want to do. There is no penalty for bringing 2 players in for the same motivation or activity. No penalty, no benefit. It's all separate that way. So a little development here. Prince Ahanatu, UConn has suddenly entered the fray, and they're going pretty aggressively after him. So this is one of those points where you'd have to make the decision, do I think I can get him still, or should I back off of him? In this case, I think it's probably worth backing off of him. Although I'm curious if UConn's actually going to aggressively pursue him, or if they're going to just offer him and just kind of forget about him like the CPU seems to do. So we're not going to, you know, jump to any decisions right now, but I'm going to see how it is next week if they've, you know, if they're pushing to catch up to our lead. Oh yeah, something else I should have told you guys a little bit ago, but if you look over here at their grades, the playing time grade will generally indicate what their overall is. Now, in the case of Delaware here, we're just fighting just to make sure we could field a team, since we're going to lose so many players in the first year. Playing time grade's not really going to be super indicative, but if you have a bunch of players on your board from the same position group, some of them will have better playing time grades than one another. I wish I could show you that. Unfortunately, I don't think I have an example of that here. But playing time is going to be based on who's currently on your team, and if the player that you're recruiting is better than that player, or also who else you're recruiting. So if Schobert, whatever, was like way better than Goda, then we would see Goda would have a worse playing time grade and therefore be less interested in coming here because he recognizes that we're going after the way better player. Unfortunately, since our team is so bad, there's not really a scale for the game to check that against. And, you know, we're not really going to know. So we're coming up on our first commit here. It's going to be Mick Schmitz. He hasn't committed yet. But if you just look at the progress up in the progress bar, that gold bar at the top, you can see that in 2 weeks he will commit. But we had the visit this week, so that'll give us a little extra influence. We should get him next week, just based on how fast that bar is filling up. You can see the different hues of gold there indicate the new influence against the old influence against what's left. In the case of Tony Virgin, Temple is playing a little bit of hardball there. We're kind of curious to see how this is actually going to go for us. They have a visit right after us, although they're only gaining on a weekly basis the same that we're gaining. So I'm kind of curious if we're going to be able to lock them up on that visit, or at least build a lead so big that they cannot contest us there. But same thing as I've been doing this whole time is just I'm going down the list and I'm just looking at everybody that we're still going in for and seeing if there's any new competition or any new developments with them. It looks like with Prince Ahanotu, UConn is putting in more influence than I care to like try and compete with, so I'm just gonna take him off the board and they can have him. It's pretty important in this game, especially in the early stages of like a dynasty. It's really important to not get too emotionally invested in any of the players on your board. More often than not, you're gonna end up not getting them. Like, I mean, I started with 35 guys. I've probably filtered like half that initial board off. And, you know, I'm still going after like mostly the same guys, but you just kind of have to go on the basis that like your team's not very good. Your school's not very appealing. You're not going to get everybody you're going in for. And it sucks, but that is the reality of this. So, you know, you got to be able to know when it's time to kind of pull the plug on a recruit, because you don't want to waste points. It's really important that you don't waste points, because you don't have a lot of points to begin with. So the way I like to think about it is I take how many points I have available per week, in this case 350, and I multiply that by how many weeks I can actually recruit in the regular season, which is 14. So whatever 350 times 14 is how many hours I have for an entire season. And if I sit there and I try and waste or try and compete with other schools for players I'm just not going to get because my grades are so bad, then I'm just going to end up losing those players and therefore wasting a large portion of my yearly recruiting points, which could go to better use to improving your team. All right, so checking in on that visit, we actually lost by a large margin. So because the blowout worked against us, we actually didn't get any influence for the visit. You can see there in the bottom right, all those green little pips are empty. If they were good and the visit was good, then they'd be full. But yeah, because we got blown out by MTSU, great game, by the way, we got no influence for this, which it's not the biggest deal. We're still going to get them, but it's just kind of funny to point out. And it's important that you recognize how this works. So you can see that minus 75% blowout factor does apply to you both ways. In the case of Tony Virgin, because we got blown out and we got no influence for that, I'm actually a little nervous that we're not going to get him. And therefore we would have wasted the 50 hours per week on a guy that, you know, not super confident that we're going to get him, but we'll see how Temple's visit goes this week. All right, we got our first commit. Mick Schmitz, just as I predicted, the 3-star right guard. We'll see what happened with the other guy. So looking at Tony Virgin, Temple definitely had a good visit, and they're catching up to us. We're only 2 weeks out from him committing either direction. I'm kind of thinking we'll be okay because they weren't really pursuing him too aggressively. I'm going to stay in on Tony Virgin here. Because we committed Schmitz, those 50 hours that we had been putting into him are now ours to spend on someone else. So you could go on to someone completely extra off of the outside of the original group of dudes you were doing, or you can just reinforce 2 of these guys up to 50 hours. And, you know, get some of these guys faster. But if you look closely, I mean, you know, looking through all of these guys, we're going to get them all. And I'll show you why we just are going to get them all when we get to the transfer portal. Although Steve Goda, it looks like Rutgers wants him. And because they have that tier 5 pipeline, it might not even be worth staying in on him. I will stay in on him, honestly, because like I said, outside linebackers are not easy to find this late in the season. And we do have a pretty large lead. I think it might just be worth going 50 hours deep on him, though, in the way of a hard sell and an extra 50 hours. And then we may as well also, while we're here, get that visit scheduled, because that's probably a good way to kind of like shake their little attempt off at trying to get this guy. Now that we're increasing our influence with him and getting that visit next week, I think that'll be a good way to try and get him anyways. But again, looking at everybody else besides Tony Virgin and looking at everybody else, we're winning all these by large margins, and I'm not seeing any major competition really even in the top 5. For some of these guys like Lynn Cleveland, you know, that's kind of scary. The other teams that could jump up and try and grab him. But, you know, otherwise, like, we're not really competing for, you know, any top end prospects that are drawing the attention of big schools. So when we get to the portal, I'll show you why we just have the rest of those guys in the bag. And you don't have to worry about how many of these players you have committed by the end of the high school recruiting session. But again, I'll show you that in just a minute. Well, maybe I should hard sell someone that we have like decent grades for. Yeah. This guy, Chauncey Scales. Let's hard sell him for whatever he's interested in, whatever that one is. So in the case of Steve Goda, I think I was right. Going up to 50 hours a week alone has solved the issue, I think. We will commit him probably next week. Now, someone should answer this in the comments or something, but I'm not positive. Does a player get more? Do you get more influence with a player on a week-to-week just for having a visit scheduled? I kind of feel like you do. I'm not positive on that, but I've kind of had that hypothesis since last year. So if someone knows that, let me know. Only if you have strategists. Really? Okay, interesting. But in the case of Steven Riggins, we'll get him. In the case of Tony Virgin, we can see there at the with the progress bar at the top that we are going to get him. He'll commit next week. So we ended up being fine despite the competition from Temple. In general, though, I mean, if Temple had gone in on him like 2 weeks earlier, we would have lost this. So it's definitely not worth risking it most of the time. And Temple's also not a great school. If you see, you know, if it had been Penn State or Rutgers who had gone in for him, we wouldn't have stood a chance. All right, and our second commit is Steve Goda. We should have another one. Yeah, so Steven Riggins. So we've already addressed immediately Tony Virgin. We've addressed the O-line needs pretty solidly with 3 total offensive line commits. And then the outside linebacker, like I said, for me, they're kind of worth their weight in gold because I find it so difficult to recruit them later in the season. There's not a whole lot of players that are really even in that pool to begin with, let alone guys that are interested in going to your school. But now, since we've committed 4 dudes, we have a bunch of hours available to us. And again, the choice is yours if you want to broaden this this recruiting scope and try and go after some of the additional players, or if you'd rather just go after the main dudes you were going after in the first place. That choice is yours at this point. But just over the course of time, once your hours become available, just kind of either broadening your recruiting scope and going after extra dudes. You can see in the total of my scope here, I'm going after 15 guys now instead of the original 14. But I'm also reinforcing some of these guys. So towards the end of the season, just making sure we commit them and have them in place, so that way we don't have to mess around with this come the portal. And then again, once you have those random 5, 10 hours, 15 hours, whatever, and you're not really sure what to do with them, a visit's a great way to go. You're not, if you're playing the games and stuff, you're more than likely gonna, win them, and or in most cases you'll win those games, and then you'll have that extra influence bump. Or in my case, since I'm just simming through all of the games, you'll lose them, and it'll be worth nothing. Recruits have various prices for their visits based on how far away they are. So in the case of Rashawn Cash, he's from Florida. We're in Delaware, so it's just a straight shot up the coast. But it's a fairly lengthy trip anyways. And that's, considered like a medium length trip by the game. It goes from 10 is the cheapest all the way up to 40 is the most expensive. In the weird case of Alex Braham here, Southern Alabama has entered the fray. But again, they're not really putting a whole lot into him. So honestly, I'm just going to go to another player. Any player will do. And I'll take their points away and end up giving them to Braham. Here, Chuck Woods, we can see we pretty much have him locked up. It would take a miracle for us to lose him to UTSA or Hawaii. So I'm just going to take his points to give him to Braham just to stay in that fight. Part of the reason I've been telling you guys that it doesn't, we have all these guys locked up, I'll tell you now. I'll let you in on the secret now. Once you get into the transfer portal, CPU teams will always disengage from other high school players as long as they don't have a lead. So in the case of Alex Braham here, where Southern Alabama is trying to break into him, as long as we get into the portal and we have a pretty sizable lead, they will take him off their board and rescind their scholarship offer, so that way they can make more room on their board for transfer portal players. I don't know the logic behind that. It just works every single time. So that's why I'm not super worried about locking all of these guys up in the regular season, because you will just get them for free in the postseason. Recruiting works like this. If we finished, if it was week 4 of the transfer portal, which is the last opportunity you have to recruit any of these guys, and we were the only school that had a scholarship offered to a guy, and we were in the lead for him, he would just automatically commit to us. In the cases of this, where it's fairly close between us and UConn, if it finished just like this, where we're still on top, he would commit to us, even though UConn has a scholarship. So a recruit will commit to the highest school on his board, but only if they've offered him a scholarship. In the case of if we pulled our scholarship and UConn was the highest scholarship offer for him, but they were number 2 on his board when recruiting finished, he just wouldn't commit anywhere, which is weird logic, but it's true. You'll see it all the time in transfer portal, players just not committing anywhere. He'll go on with his choir career or something like that, marching band. But that's how this works, is we just have to be the number 1 team on his board and ideally be the only team that's offered him. UConn will drop off of him. They will pull his scholarship offer and take him off their board once we get to the transfer portal. So that's why we just have to be leading going into the transfer portal for just to get these guys. So it's really not as pressing to get these guys wrapped up in the regular season. You don't even have to be putting hours into them in the portal, because the CPU will never prioritize a high school player over a transfer portal player, even if it's a 4-star guy. 5 stars generally don't make it that far, but a 4-star guy, I've seen it all the time. CPU will never prioritize a 4-star high school player over a 3-star or whatever transfer portal player. So that's why you just have to be building leads through the regular season. That's the logic here. We're just building leads. All right, so there's Chauncey Scales, our next commit. I did have Scales on a visit. Unfortunately, we lost that game, so there was a clear winner factor there of minus 50% for the game influence that we got. But because the visit itself was fairly good, we got half of the total possible influence for the visit, as you can see by the 5 filled-in green pips against the 5 not filled-in pips, which was clearly enough to get him locked up. And then looking at the other guys we had visits for, Russ Sanders, I guess he was not as thrilled with the visit. I guess, actually, for Russ Sanders, I think part of it was, well, Scales had an A+ interest for his motivation that we went after, not to mention the complimentary visit for him. But Sanders did not have the same. He did not have a complimentary visit, and he did not have a great grade for his motivation. B- is okay, but not great. So we didn't really get any influence for that. But, you know, if I had played that game and we had won, it would have been a different story. You can also see, you can see UConn, their spirit breaking live. They're actively seeing our dominance for recruits, and they're just kind of backing off. So, like, I don't know if they've prioritized other guys because they're also avoiding the competition or what, but we were originally concerned about UConn going in for Zach Byer. Now I'm not concerned about that because it's hard to see just based on the dark blue color of that bar. And same thing for like App State. They have a black influence bar. It's hard to see their progress, but I can faintly make out that they're not really getting any progress with Zach Byer. So that's another win for us. And you can see here, I mean, like, my board's only 18 guys deep. Adding more high school players to this list isn't actually going to help me to this point. I'm pretty set on getting 15 or so high school players, then addressing the rest in the portal. Because, again, those portal players are going to be so much better. And you can still get freshmen and sophomores in the portal, so you still have, like, a young team. But they'll just instantly come in and be, like, mid-70 overall players, which certainly helps us more than a low 60 overall freshman. Another commit, we got Henry Rhodes from Windsor, Colorado. So that offensive line is really filling out, which if I was taking this dynasty seriously, I would feel really good about. All right, so here in the bowl weeks, bowl week 1 of 4, I think actually the previous week as well, we're not actually able to recruit, but we can see early national signing days, so we can see where we're at with all of our commits and recruits. We finished with 6 commits, which is not a lot. If we go look at the top classes, you can see Georgia already has a full class. I don't really know. That's not good logic, though, because then they can only go get 2 transfer portal players. Versus Bama is kind of sitting where we want to be with 18 commits, about half and half, so to speak. And obviously they have 4 stars and 5 stars, which we don't have. But 6 commits is not a lot. But if you factor in the fact that we just are going to get all of these guys, plus Chuck Woods is basically a commit. I mean, look at him. We're sitting pretty good. I mean, you know, we basically have something like at least 15 guys that are committed. That's remarkable. It's crazy. The 2 cornerbacks I added like last second. So did the rest of FBS. It's crazy. Now, throughout the postseason, you will not gain influence with players. Certain weeks you will. So you'll see after the bowl weeks conclude, you will get like a random commit here or there or whatever. But during the bowl weeks, you will not get influence with recruits. So everything just stays as it was. Now, we're simming into the first week of the postseason, or I guess the off season. And you can see that's where we're starting to get influence again, evidenced by Chuck Woods, who we had him committed. It was just like a smidgen off. Just for, I guess, for fun, we're going to look at the players leaving tab. Oh my God. It's like all the starters. It's like all the starters. I set mine. I don't know about you guys. I set mine to 25 max portal players per team. The default's 20. So I guess I set myself up for that. I'm obviously not going to try and convince any of them to stay. I don't really care. But if this was a dynasty I was actually going to play, I'd be really upset. All right, we're here in week 1 of the portal. So let me show you guys what the mindset is here. Basically, anybody that I still want to go after, I'm going to leave them on the board. We have the scholarship offer on all of them, and we have like large leads on all of them. So all these guys that I still want to go get, we're gonna go get them. It's that easy. If you look at your team needs now, anybody who transferred will be off of this list. So you'll have a relatively updated list of team needs. However, all those seniors that you're seeing there are not actually still on the team. They don't update off of this until next week, week 2 of the transfer portal. So that guy, Silver, the running back, he's gone. He's in, he's working a 9 to 5 at State Farm or something. Not a sponsor, but let me know. Yeah, he's not on this team anymore. So he still shows up on the team needs. Don't get confused. He's not here. The players don't like progress towards their next, year status. Spiller won't become a junior until next week. Silver won't become a, State Farm employee till next week, and so on and so forth. Same thing with Zach Marker there. He's off the team. He's working at I don't know, Wendy's, but the corporate Wendy's. He's not like slinging burgers. Now, like I said, don't be alarmed when you see like a team still in for a guy that you're pursuing in the portal. This is week 1. By week 2, Rutgers should have him off their board. But this is kind of where you have to kind of take the reins. Do you want to just go after all these high school guys that you were recruiting, or do you want to look at your portal and say, okay, well, I've got 10 guys in high school that I really want. That sounds really, really bad out of context, but I want to go get 25 from the portal. You can make that decision here. If you want to accelerate your dynasty, do that. But if you want to take it a little bit slower and, develop your players and probably get some more connection to them and stuff like that, then just stay on your high school guys, because these guys will be easier to commit and recruit than portal players. Especially with how few resources we have. We're not going to be able to do any scouting. Remember, each player costs 5 total hours to offer a scholarship to, so we're gonna have to budget that and then see what's left over afterwards for recruiting. Oh shit, Arch Manning and Marcel Reed are both in the portal. I've seen Marcel Reed. I have never seen Arch Manning in the portal. That's crazy. It's also weird that he's a pocket passer in the game. Devin Dampier from Utah. DJ Lagway, biggest fraud in college football. JKS, he's gonna be a Heisman candidate in like 2 years. Just watch. All right, so you might be flipping through these 4-star prospects and stuff, like looking at any of these guys that might be interested. I would not. Even with like a team that consistently makes the playoffs, I still rarely commit the 4 stars. It's like it's a case of like luck. It's a case of like doing the right thing at the exact right time. It's not even worth trying, I swear. Plus, again, you don't have the hours. You just don't have the hours. You can try it. It's your dynasty, especially if you had a very successful high school recruiting period, and you're very comfortable with the guys that are on your board from the high school recruiting. Like in this case, if I wanted to just keep those 17 high school players on my board and then just fill in 17 or 18 portal guys, then I guess I could take a shot on one of the 4 stars. I just don't think it's a good idea because I think it's really hard to get them. You don't generally see 4-star portal guys not go recruited. It's very rare. No, instead, you're going to make your money here in the 3 stars. And really, there's not a whole lot of limit to which 3 stars you can go after. I do recommend avoiding the juniors just because they're going to graduate as soon as you grab them. You get them for 1 year. If you want to, my method is rather going after underclassmen transfers because they're still going to come in at like a mid 70 overall or whatever. And, for a team like this, that's great. But also, I'll have them for a few years and I'll be able to develop them up. For a 3-star junior, that generally means he's like probably an 80 overall. For a 3-star freshman, he's going to come in at like a 74, 75 overall, whatever, maybe 72 at the lowest. And then by the time he graduates from my school several years later, he'll be mid 80s. You know what I mean? So the ceiling's higher, the floor is lower, but the ceiling's higher. Now that said, do it how you want to do it. Nowadays, you see teams generally prefer going after, the established upperclassmen in the portal. But if you want to go that route, more realistic, by all means. If you want to go after some of the younger players, that way you have a few years to develop them and everything like that. That's not a bad idea. So I just want to point out, if you start with Delaware, I graduated 35 guys. I have 63 after all the portal players. I have something like 28 players on this team. Something else worth noting, the players are ranked based on their overall. So the players all the way at the top, like if we go look at like over here, Christopher Vizina is going to be the best quarterback that money can buy in the portal, besides Taven Jackson, but I'm pretending he doesn't exist because he's not interested in us. But he just automatically is going to be, Vizina's automatically going to be better than, for example, Chris Denson. Because the portal is not like, the rankings are just solely based on overall. There's no factor of like dev trait. There's no factor of how old a player is. You'll see all the time like you'll see freshmen like ranked top 25 in the portal, and that just indicates that they're like really good. It doesn't indicate that their like ceiling is higher or anything like that. The rankings here are incredibly shallow. Just it's based on overall. So you know, you can, the further down you go, the worse player you're picking up. But sometimes it's worth it for, you know, maybe there's a player you have a connection to from a previous dynasty or whatever. But more so to try and find those like freshman and sophomore transfers that you can develop into better players later on. Now I could do the clickbaity thing and just go after like the bottom ranked players just to like try and enhance how my strategy works, but I'm not going to do that. I like to recruit with integrity, boys. Your favorite streamer does not recruit with integrity. I recruit with integrity. That's why I should be your favorite streamer. So click that follow button if you haven't already. Something else worth noting is that like you know, the players that this works the same way as recruiting high school players. Like the players that you add to your board initially, they might not be the guys you commit, you know, like you're going to kind of work the same way where like you're not really able to go after all the same dudes at once or all the dudes at once. You're going to have to prioritize certain players and stuff. So, you know, you're generally just going to add to your board dudes that you would like to go after. Then you're going to have to figure out how do you divide your resources effectively so that way you can get all the players you want to get. In this case, this week 1, we can recruit as well as offer scholarships and scout people. I'm gonna tell you right now, do not scout people here. It's not worth doing. You don't have the hours to scout. When you're deeper into a dynasty and you're able to like really load up your board, or no, sorry, you have a lot of resources for recruiting, you know, closer to 800, 900,000 hours and stuff. At that point, yeah, you can scout, but you can see here we have 450 hours. And we don't have the hours to scout. We're going to have to try and just do the 25 into everybody method and hope it works. In the portal, it's so much more broad. You're not really going to be fighting for the same like crazy, highly touted players. So you don't have to worry so much about pipeline, at least when you're adding players to your board. Now, you still have to know when to back off of dudes, though. You have to know like when the situation calls for you just to say, okay, I got to save my points for someone else. You know, the point of the portal, my method in the portal will get you up to 35 guys. Like it generally does not fail to get me a full recruiting class. But you still have to know when to back off of players in order to make that happen. You can't try and force something. If you see another team is going in for someone and they are getting way more influence per week than you are, that generally means you don't stand a chance of getting that guy. So at that point, just back off and, you know, put your points into someone you do stand a chance at getting. In the case of this, we're putting 25 hours into everybody. We're not going to get everybody we're doing with this method. It's just not going to work that way. So we're going to have to evaluate, you know, who this is working on and who this isn't working on, and then, you know, make a decision from there. You could also go raid the prospect list for whatever high school players are still left, you know, unrecruited. Because again, the CPU will not go push for any of these high school players. So, you know, whichever high school players are still available, you can pretty much have for free. All you got to do is put enough hours into them to get the lead on them, and then you're set there. But you know, that's your call if you want to do that. Again, for me, I prefer going after like portal players just because it gets me, you know, it gets better players into the team, and you still have the youth factor by getting underclassmen and stuff. All right, so now that it's, oh my God, I didn't think it was true, but it's true. It's true. We have 28 players on this team. Oh, that's so bad. I've never seen such a small team. That's so bad. Oh my goodness. We're going to have 63 players if we get a full class. And in order to make this a functioning football team, we're going to need a full class. We'll have walk-ons, man. We'll have walk-ons. We'll have to get the student body to come try out for the football team. This is insane. But like I promised, all the players that were seniors that were still showing up on this team needs portion are all gone. So you get a clearer picture of who's actually on the team. And for us in particular, it's not good. It's really, really not good. I was so confused why I was saying we need 7 outside linebackers. We need 7 outside linebackers. That's a real thing. That's a genuine thing that has happened to us. I am aware that we need a punter. And I'm kind of just thinking we ought to just have a walk-on come punt because we genuinely need to get 35 guys for the rest of the team. If we let a walk-on come punt, then we'll have 36 guys technically. So that genuinely might be worth considering for our strategy here. Now, I would tell you never go after 2 stars or anything like that. It's never worth it. They're never going to come in and be good enough. 2 stars are generally like at best like 70 overall. I think maybe 71 or 72. We need 2 stars with this team. You know. Also, here in week 2, I told you guys, I promised you guys that other teams would just disengage from any players they were going after. Remember those cornerbacks that I had put on that the rest of FBS decided to also target in the last week of high school recruiting? Yeah, they all backed off. They're all looking at their portal guys now, so we can just collect that passive influence gain and ideally just get them for free. This is also kind of one of those situations where like you just straight up can't get enough players to cover the team. This is crazy. This is crazy. You like literally just can't get enough players to fill all the headcount issues. So like you're just kind of screwed. Like, I mean, Strickland, we actually could hypothetically just move him to linebacker. But what did I tell you guys? Linebackers are really hard to get in this in recruiting. Sometimes they're just not goddamn available. So now I'm just going through making sure that, you know, if there is competition, we stand a chance of winning it. And ideally, there is no competition for any of these players. So like in this case of Christopher Vazina, I don't want to compete when we need players. I'm not going to bother competing. Same thing, Jordan Thomas. I'm not going to bother competing there. Quincy Porter, we don't stand a chance against a P4 school like NC State, Mason Wade. So there's a lot of players that I'm going to have to just kind of back off of and reassess and try and grab kind of replacements for in the transport. I'm wondering if the CPU will pursue like underclassmen, like prioritize going after underclassmen before upperclassmen. I wonder if that's something in the game. Now, generally, I would tell you guys never go after 2 stars or 1 stars. It's never that serious. It's never that bad. It is. I've never been in a worse position in recruiting. But we are at a point where it's genuinely like required of us to go after some 2 stars. Just 1 2-star, but you get the point. It's a bad situation that we're in here. If you're ever playing Delaware, you got to make sure you have a really good first season because whatever we did was upsetting to our players for, you know, clearly. All right, looking at this, going back through it all, I mean, all those high school guys were still, you know, pretty much 100% going to commit, which is still great. But then we get into the portal guys. So going through them all, making sure there's no competition. In the case of DJ McKinney, I think we're okay. Running backs are not too hard to find. So even if this ends up being a lot like hairier, we should be fine. And we can just replace them if we need to at the end. But still looking through everybody else. And then really just getting hours on everybody possible because we need to have a massive class. Miami, you can't let me have this one. Miami of Ohio, you guys really got to do that. You know, in this case, because we literally have no other options for like mics and linebackers that we can go get. I'm genuinely just gonna not avoid competition here because I don't know what else to do besides go after like a 2-star, which I'd certainly prefer not doing. Also, Micah Strickland appears to not have eyebrows. Which is terrifying discovery. But yeah, in this case, like we need him really badly because there are literally no other mics and literally no other outside linebackers that we can go get to replace him. Now, what you could do in this case is you could go grab a like safety and move them down. Safeties play pretty well at linebacker. It's something the NFL does all the time. In the case of us, we totally could do that, but I kind of don't want to continue shuffling this board around because I've been literally recording this whole video in one sitting. But if we need to here in week 4, we will. All right, this is the final week of high school, or no, this is the final week of recruiting for this season. So again, going through, and this is the most critical week. This is where the method wins or it loses, and I've never had it lose. But basically, every player that you have a fairly commanding lead on, you're going to pull your points off of. And you're going to put those points into a player that you don't have a commanding lead on. Like, for example, DJ McKinney. That one's hairy. Instead of going and looking for a worse player to go get, I'm going to double down on him. We're not in his top 5, so Utah State can only take the same actions I can take. And the pipeline factor shouldn't really be that big of a deal because it's a tier 1 versus a no tier. But in this case, putting 50 hours on him should get us DJ McKinney. We have a commanding lead on Robert Wright, even though he is someone we really need. I don't see a reality in which any other team is going to be able to steal him from us. Jaheim Buchanan is someone that we probably should pull points off of someone else. So, like, for example, Caden Sweat. We can give ourselves his points and then double down on Jaheim Buchanan just to make sure that all those other teams that we are fairly close in proximity with our influence with, like Miami, we're basically tied with Miami. If Miami wakes up and decides they want him, they're just going to get him if they put as many, if not more, points than us. In the case of Justin DeLeon, we have to reinforce that there. Because North Texas has a much better pipeline than us, and they are pushing fairly hard for him. In the case of Mana 2020, we can't get him. Even with 50 hours, Miami of Ohio, I should say, is pushing pretty hard on him. So I'm gonna have to go get someone off of the rest of the transfer portal board, and I'm gonna have to show you guys how this method really works, but that's probably a good thing for you guys. So basically, now that it's week 4, we don't have a ton of time to try and build a lead with a player. Like, it's now or never kind of thing. And if you don't get in first place on their board, it won't matter if you're the only school that's offered them. They just won't come to your school. They just won't commit anywhere. You have to be in first place and offer them a scholarship for them to go to your to commit. So because of that situation, we have to go find a player that is not being recruited by anybody else. So that way we can just dump a scholarship and 50 hours into them and immediately take first place on their board, because that's how it works. Unfortunately, it does not look like there are any 3-stars available for that. We could go look at safeties and again, move a safety down. Because all of our grades are so bad, and the deal breaker system means that most of these players don't want to come here because we have a deal breaker goal that we're not meeting. But in this case, we could go after either Jalen Jones or Cody DeCombra. Neither of them have offers from any other school, and both of them are safeties, so we could just move them down to play like Mike or something. You don't need a ton of size to play. Well, I guess you kind of need weight to play Mike. 185 pounds probably isn't going to cut that. But yeah, looking at everybody else, though, I mean, you know, we have decent leads everywhere else. You know, are we totally safe with everybody? I would say probably not. But I mean, we just don't have the resources to otherwise like reinforce everybody. For anybody who's like super important that I want to just go really fast, reinforce, like in the case of probably in the case of I don't know. I mean, I guess thinking Caleb Moore or Cam Dyer, the quarterback. Maybe Jordan Shaw's the move here. So we do need secondary help. I mean, we need everything, right? But yeah, let's just reinforce him. And then we're good there. Let's advance week, and I'll show you the beauty of this method. How many messages we're gonna have to skip past really fast because we have so many commits here. His meal. All right, we got Ben Sams, the quarterback that we went after since week 1. Russ Sanders, the receiver we went after since week 1. David Longo, we've been after him since week 1. I'm actually gonna snooze the ad just so you guys can watch this glory. Lynn Cleveland, good right tackle. He was pretty highly ranked too. Alex Braham, remember there was that hairiness, someone else was going in for him, we ended up getting him. Rashawn Catch, there were a lot of teams in for him that we ended up getting him. Zach Byer, UConn was pushing for him, we still got him. Mike Sullivan, good center commit there. Remember, that's one of the cornerbacks that everybody was going after, and they all backed off like I said they would. Mustafa Orgy, yes please. Cam Dyer, quarterback, Arizona State legend. Corey Platt, great outside linebacker if you guys ever see him in the portal. Zaquan Bryan. I won't read all of these out loud because it's just going to get annoying, but you see the vision here, right? You see what I was talking about. This is the method that nets you a ton of recruits. Is it foolproof? No. Is it going to get you the best players? Not all the time, but most of the time, yeah. There's really no method in the game that's just automatically going to get you all the 5-stars and stuff. This isn't like NCAA 14 where you could just like save scum the insta commit glitch. In CFB26, there's so many factors that go into recruiting. This method takes into account all the factors. So you're going to end up getting a large class that's going to account for all your needs and make your team better, just categorically. And I'm curious, did we end up not getting anybody? Usually there's like 1 or 2 guys that we don't get in this case. Remember, I didn't recruit a punter. I wish I could have shown you that method. I probably should have shown you that method just for the sake of showing you the method. But just going down the board, it looks like we got literally everybody. So we have a class of 35, which is badly needed for this team. And if we go into the top classes, where does good old Delaware rank? I imagine we're pretty good for the transfer class, but the overall class, we're sitting 52, which isn't bad. We had 35 total commits, 34 3-stars, and 1 2-star. And that 2-star was an emergencies 2-star. I've never had to do that in College Football 26. But we had the number 16 overall transfer class, and then we had I can't even imagine for regular recruits. I presume it's pretty bad. I know I could just oh no, wow, 31. I don't know how they combine 17 and 31 and get 52, but whatever. But there you go. That is the Carson Yapps official recruiting method for College Football 26. 99% of the time, it works every time. You will always have large classes full of, young players that you can help lay your foundation with in your program, as well as transfer portal players who are going to come in and make an immediate impact. I had 28 guys on this team, and look, we damn near look like an actual football team, boys. What do you think about that? We look like an actual football team here. Maybe not like maxed out in terms of how many players we have, but we actually look like a little football team here. Kind of crazy. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. Definitely come over to the Twitch. Twitch.tv/Carson Yapps. I'm streaming this on Twitch, so I'm in the exclamation point command mode. But yeah, pop over to the Twitch, drop a follow over there if you enjoyed this. I'm always live every night playing CFB26 or some other sports game usually. Maybe not sports, I don't really know. But yeah, come over there, ask your questions. If you have any other questions, ask your question under the video. Whatever you want to do. I wonder if future Carson actually edited this video. How do we have 174 coach points? What the I wonder if future Carson actually edited this video, or if I just uploaded this whole thing in one go. I think it's gonna be both. I don't know how I have 174 coach points though. That's ridiculous. I've never seen that many. Anyways, boys, appreciate y'all, and I'll see y'all later. Peace out.